Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner and today I'm going to be making my predictions for the finals of the Manchester Major. So here we are at the end, already 2 phases in the books, and before I actually make the predictions, we're of course going to be recapping a little bit phases 1 and 2, especially 2 since we already sort of went over phase number 1. But I mean, if you haven't been following along but you did use my predictions, then I did earn enough points for the battle pass. So leave me a like, come on, I think I earned it. It was looking really dubious at one point, but we got across the line 5 points in phase 1, 9 points in phase 2, good enough for 14 points overall, and that's what you need for the battle pass. Still 3 points left on the table, so if you're still gunning for a higher tier, or if you didn't follow along with my previous predictions and you need a few more points, let's see if we can get more. But I think the finals are going to be especially hard to predict, and also there's only 3 points available as opposed to the 8 in phase 1 and 16 in phase 2. So right, let's work our way back and let's recap. Okay, so we've already seen this. Let's go over this just really quickly. Space Station and Liquid were the 2 teams that advanced via the upper bracket into phase number 2. I got both of those teams correct, but I had Space Station predicted through the upper bracket, whereas I had G2 instead of Liquid here. So 2 points for me for Space Station, 1 for Liquid, and then I had Cyclops correct in the lower bracket. I did not have Bleed correct. And unfortunately for me, had G2 played as people expected, like they beat Liquid and then they also beat GK, or if Furex somehow made it here, and they made it here, that would have been two points for me for G2. And then Liquid would have been down here playing against Bleed rather than it ends up being Furex. But Liquid, they did defeat Bleed in Swiss to advance into top 8. So if that held true, if Liquid did beat Bleed in phase 1 instead of phase 2, I would have had the full 8 points. So G2 really let me down. Anyways, only 5 out of 8 points, but I think it was pretty reasonable. And then moving on into phase number 2 here. These were all of the results. You're probably aware of most of them, all of them, however many, if you've been keeping up with the major. I'll have my full recap for phase number 2. I'm probably going to record it after this, but I'll upload that one tomorrow, whereas this video I'm doing now, I'll be uploading tonight, like Wednesday. So these are the map scores, and in the best of 3s, it is the match scores. So you see like a 2-0 here, whereas you see an 8-7 here. And let's talk about the teams that, well, let's say who was eliminated first. So E1, SSG, Into the Breach, Cyclops, Scars, and then on the final day, Bliss, Bleed, and Talon all eliminated. Yes, APAC. They had 3 chances, but they could not get across the line, as I predicted. And then as for the teams that qualified, okay, so Furia made it in at 3-0. I had them at 3-1, so that's only 1 point for me. I definitely could have switched them out for either FaZe or BDS, and I would have done BDS after I found out that Furia and BDS played each other in the first day. I didn't do it, so it ended up costing me a point, but that's 1 point on the board. And then Secret make it through, and I guess I didn't predict them to go through. That's my bad. Had I wanted them in, probably the team I would have replaced was ITB. I really thought that ITB would get a little bit more of a boost from the like the hometown team advantage. Yes, they didn't play in front of the crowd, but they were still playing close to home, and they were playing for the chance to play in front of all their friends and family, presumably, because they wouldn't have had to travel far. The majority of the roster is British, and maybe this also applies to Secret. They are, a European team for the most part. I guess they have some Brazilian members, whether that be on the team or on the staff. But anyways, as a majority European team who plays in the European League, probably some of their friends, family, whatever would have been in attendance, but you get my meaning. Anyways, ITB fell a little bit short. Maybe my expectations were a little bit lofty. They were the 2nd seed out of Europe, whereas Secret was the 3rd seed, but Secret definitely was the 2nd best team throughout the round robin portion of Europe. They were, top 2 just behind BDS. Okay, and then as for the 3-1 teams, I had SSG here instead of M80. I originally had M80 before I changed my predictions after seeing the plans, and I kind of wanted to have all 4 NA teams, but then I decided I didn't want to have all 4. I didn't think all 4 NA teams would make it through, and so I had 3, and well, I just picked the wrong one, unfortunately. I went with SSG instead of M80. Had I swapped those out, had I had M80 here, I mean, that would have been another 2 points for me. Would have been cool. And I did get FaZe correct, but again, I had them at 3-0, so that's only 1 point, and I had Dark Zero here at 3-1. So far that's 1 point for Furia, 1 point for FaZe, and 2 points for Dark Zero. And then moving into the 3-2, this is where the majority of my points were made. BDS, I had them at 3-0, but I still get a point for them qualifying. And then I did have Liquid and Beast Coast both at 3-2, so I got their they're positioned right as well. So 1 point for BDS, 2 for Liquid, and 2 for Beast Coast on top of the 4 I just mentioned before. That is 9 points in phase number 2. And one more thing before we go forward, even if you don't end up wanting to use my predictions, keep in mind these 8 teams I just talked about, these are the only 8 teams that can make it to the final. Everyone else is out of the event, even though Ubisoft still has given you the ability to select them in the drop down. So again, don't pick any teams except for Furia, Secret, M80, FaZe, Dark Zero, BDS, Liquid, and Beast Coast. And also we're going to look at the matchups, so that might also change the combinations of teams you might want to pick. But don't pick anyone except for those 8 teams if you want a chance at getting any points. Okay, so I think that's all the recap we need to do. Let's now look at the final bracket, the top 8. Now you'll notice we have a lot of regional matchups here. We have Europe versus Europe, North America versus North America, and Brazil versus Brazil. So we actually saw the maximum number of regional matchups in this first round, but do keep in mind that this was not a manufactured bracket. This was not a randomly drawn bracket. The matchups you see here were a direct result of the Swiss portion. So because of how the teams played, who won, who lost, this bracket was set up. It was not random and it was not created artificially. So keep those things in mind. But even with that said, I don't think it is too bad having all of these regional matchups in the first round, because it almost guarantees that in the grand final we will be seeing 2 different regions represented. The only way that won't be the case is if it's NA versus NA. So if Beast Coast makes it all the way to the grand final and then Dark Zero or M80 make it to the grand final, it's the only way we would see a regional matchup in the grand final. Both of the European teams are going against each other here, so one will be eliminated, and all 3 of the Brazilian teams are on the same side of the bracket, Furia, Liquid, and FaZe, so only one of them can actually make it past the semifinals. Okay, let's talk about the actual matchups, and we do have a little bit of history between all of the teams since they are from the same region, and FaZe and Beast Coast not from the same region, but they did play in Swiss. So starting with Secret versus BDS, they played on Skyscraper. It went round 15 and BDS won it. It was a 4-2 defensive half from each team, and then Secret actually started on defense in overtime. They won their defense, and then BDS won their defense, and then BDS won the final round, which was an attack for them. Secret couldn't go back to their primary choice because they'd already won it in overtime, and so BDS won on Secret's secondary site. So as close as it could possibly be, and BDS took it down. Dark Zero versus M80, also a Skyscraper game. It went 7-4 in favor of M80. I think they're generally pretty solid on Skyscraper. They did sort of choke it against Luminosity, but otherwise I think pretty good. So that's a victory for them. Dark Zero was pretty bad for the first 4 games of NAL. They had an overtime win against Los, but that was the worst team in the league, and then an overtime loss against SSG. Otherwise, they lost to M80 and they got smoked by Sonic. So they started off pretty badly, and they did recover from there. They got 4th place in the round robin portion of NAL. And M80, the higher seed from North America, M80 was the 2nd seed, Dark Zero was the 3rd seed, but they didn't play in playoffs. Unfortunately, none of these teams played each other in playoffs, so we only saw best of ones between them. A little bit unfortunate as far as predictions go, but it is what it is. And so yeah, so again, M80 beat Dark Zero in a best of 1, and then Liquid beat Furia 8-6 on Oregon when they played. And it was actually funny because Liquid was on a 4-game losing streak, and then their first win for the stage was against the reigning world champions in Furia, XW7M. But I do feel like even though these ones went a certain way or were really close, I feel like the top 2 matchups here are the harder ones to predict. I feel like most people are going to have Furia over Liquid and FaZe over Beast Coast. Although I will certainly be rooting for Beast Coast. If there's any one team I want to win the whole thing, it is them, but I don't know, that feels kind of tough, especially with the side of the bracket that they were put on. So yeah, Liquid did beat Furia, but I would say that Furia is still a pretty heavy favorite there. And then FaZe Clan versus Beast Coast. Again, they're not from the same region, but they did play in Swiss, so let's go back and look at that. FaZe took down Beast Coast. This was also an 8-7, also on Skyscraper. This one went a little bit differently from the Secret BDS match in Europe, though. Beast Coast started on defense. They only got 3 defenses, which is pretty bad on Skyscraper, but then they switch sides. They get the first attacking round, and then they lose a round, and then they win 2 more rounds. So Beast Coast went up 6-4. They only have to win 1 of the next 2 rounds. It is on attack, so it's still tough, but they only need 1. They failed to do so, so it goes overtime 6-6. FaZe gets a round. They're up 7-6. Beast Coast gets around at 7-7. Then obviously you can see how it went here. FaZe took round number 15, so they just barely beat Beast Coast. So FaZe, a little bit of a leg up over Beast Coast, but I still think even if you disregarded that, even if Beast Coast maybe took round 15, I think in most people's assessment, FaZe would be the heavy favorite here. So, okay, now that we have the previous matches out of the way, who do I think is going to win? BDS versus Secret. This one's really hard because I think BDS does have a lot of things going for them, but the thing Secret has going for them is huge. They've been much better in this tournament than BDS. Going back to Swiss, BDS has played twice as many maps as Secret, and that's because Secret didn't lose any maps. They won versus FaZe, they won versus Dark Zero, and they 2-0'd Bliss, so that's 4 maps. Whereas BDS, they lost to Furia. I mean, if you're going to lose to any team, I guess might as well lose to them. They beat SSG, but then they lose to Talon, and then they barely beat Cyclops. They were really close to losing that. It goes all 3 maps. And then they do get the 2-0 over Bliss, so 8 maps played. I think that'll probably play to their advantage. I don't think they're going to get winded. These are all really experienced players. They have a whole day off. Maybe it would hurt them in the way that there is more very recent footage on them that Secret can review, and Secret also had more days off because they qualified after the minimum number of matches, whereas BDS was fighting to the bitter end. So yeah, just in terms of experience, I give BDS the advantage. I guess in terms of footage, Secret has the advantage, and in terms of how they've played overall, Secret has the advantage. But one more Secret advantage that some people might not consider is I assume the crowd will be rooting for BDS because they have a British player, Usus, on their team, whereas Secret, they don't have any British players. They are a majority European roster, but no British players, so no hometown heroes. So I would assume the crowd will be at BDS's back, and maybe the lights will be too bright for Team Secret on that stage because this is a relatively inexperienced roster as far as international play goes. So we'll see. I'm going to go with BDS. I would not fault you for picking Secret. I would not be surprised if Secret wins. And then we have Dark Zero versus M80. Yeah, M80 did take that win during the stage, and both of these teams actually went 3-1. They never met each other though. Looking at what happened, Dark Zero got the win over Beast Coast. They took a loss against Secret, and then they beat Scars, and then they 2-0 Bliss. And then M80, they take a win over Liquid, but it is a less decisive win than Dark Zero's, and I guess maybe against an equal team because both of these teams made it in at 3-2. You can debate which one of those teams you think is better. And then M80 lose to Bliss, so I think that's definitely a better loss for Dark Zero, losing to Secret as opposed to Bliss. You know, Secret went 3-0, Bliss got eliminated. And then M80 get a 7-0 over ITV, so really solid 7-0ing any team. I guess a better win for M80 here, but still a decisive win over Scars for Dark Zero. And then finally, M80 beat Bleed 2-0 and Dark Zero beating Bliss 2-0. It's still, I think, up for debate which is the better APAC team out of those two. And so I think maybe Dark Zero has the edge just a little bit as far as their performance in this event, but certainly this 7-0 versus 7-2 goes in favor of M80. I'm going to go with Dark Zero, just a bit of a gut feeling, and Dark Zero also the more experienced international roster. I'm going to give that one to Dark Zero. That could go either way for sure. And then Furia versus Liquid, like I said, I think Furia is the pretty heavy favorite. I don't think too many people are picking Liquid. I think this would be a fairly big upset. Liquid is sort of scraped by. They had to play through phase 1. They barely made it through phase 2. I guess they won their last one pretty decently, but still they were only 3-2. As opposed to Furia's 3-0. So yeah, easy Furia pick here, I think. And then FaZe against Beast Coast. FaZe Clan, I think, also a pretty sizable favorite. I don't think this is as big of a gap as this game feels like, but I still think most people are going to go with FaZe. I guess I'll go with FaZe, but I will certainly be rooting for Beast Coast. And that sets up BDS versus Dark Zero and Furia up against FaZe. I really don't know who I think is going to win this one. I think if BDS are capable of beating Secret, then they probably can also win this one. If they're not in form like they were for a lot of the Swiss portion, then they'll probably just lose to Secret anyways, so they won't even be here. I guess I'm going to go with Dark Zero. They were certainly better than BDS. Again, in Swiss, most of the teams that advanced were. BDS just looked shaky in a way that people did not expect. I guess I'll go with Dark Zero. And then, and I guess I forgot to mention, as far as the crowd effect goes, M80 has 2 British players, I believe, Noodle and Citizen. Dark Zero has 1 in Nafe, so I don't know if that means M80 will be the de facto most favored team by the crowd, or if Britain loves Nafe or Usus more than any of the other players. I'm not sure how that will influence things, but I guess I'm going to go Dark Zero here. I don't know, just gut call. I think a lot of people are going to pick BDS if this is the matchup that ends up happening, but I want to root for NA. I'm going to go with Dark Zero. It is what it is. And then Furia versus FaZe. This one's really, really hard. My original predictions for the grand final were actually FaZe versus BDS, and I have the opportunity to pick that because they're both here on opposite sides of the bracket. But you know what? I will go with FaZe. This is not my first time recording this. I'm re-recording it. I went with Furia the first time. I'm going to go with FaZe. Furia was better. I was doubting Furia a little bit. I thought they would still be really good coming into this tournament, but I thought maybe they would be a bit complacent. FaZe Clan would be like the hungriest team ever because they came very close, but they still came a little bit shy. I'm going to go with FaZe here. I think they'll be really, really fired up if they play against Furia. I guess I'll go with them, but I definitely think it could be Furia. So that would set up Dark Zero versus FaZe. I'm going to go with Dark Zero, just an NA bias kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not really putting that much stock in my predictions at this point because we already made it past that Battle Pass tier. And yeah, that's what I'm going to go with. So one more consideration I want to bring up is if you only need one more point, I think probably the safest predictions are going to, well, let's go over to the other screen. Let's do it here. Okay, if you only need one more point, this is probably what I would do. I would do Furia and FaZe. Both of these teams cannot make it to the grand final, but I think it's really likely that at least one of them will make it to the grand final. So that would get you 1 point. If you do need the full 3 points, definitely don't do this because it's impossible. You know, I'm going with this Dark Zero FaZe, and I'm just going to say Dark Zero wins. So that'll be my prediction. Again, I think there are probably a few more likely predictions, but I do want to align my prediction with how I want to cheer within reason. Again, I really do want to cheer for Beast Coast, but I feel like they just have a really rough path, and so I don't feel comfortable picking them. I'm going to go with this. So yeah, that's going to do it for me. Leave me a like on, on this video and also the following recap video. I really appreciate it. Comment if you have anything to say, even if it's just thanks for the predictions, thanks for the videos, whatever. And definitely subscribe if you have not done so. We passed 3,000. That's a really cool milestone for me. And I don't think I have anything else to say here, so I will catch you guys next time.